Are you sure you can do this?
Yes, trust me. Don't you trust me?
I do trust you, but I don't want to lose an eye either.
You need to be more like the Danes and trust me. This is the coolest way to slice an apple and learn how to trust like a Dane.
Okay, fine. Go ahead. That was too close, and you didn't even slice the apple.
But at least you trusted me, getting more and more Danish.
I need a safer way to learn about why Danes have such high trust levels. Actually, I know somebody else that can help me with this. My friend Sam Floy hosts a podcast called What the Denmark, and one of the most popular episodes is focused on why Danes have such high trust levels. So I'm off to meet Sam and learn why Danes trust each other. Sam, thank you so much for meeting with me. I recently listened to your podcast, one of your most popular episodes, I think, on trust in Denmark and why there's so much more trust in Danish society than at least where I come from in the US and maybe similar.
Similar in the UK.
Yeah. So one thing is, I think the trust between strangers, where does that come from in Denmark?
I trust you if you act in a way that I can predict, because that sort of means that we're in sync. And so if we're on a bus and I'm hobbling, I would predict, I'd hope that people would say, oh, that stranger is injured, I'm going to get out of my seat and let him sit down. And so when I go on the bus and other people do that, I'm like, oh, okay, my sense in trust, I trust people to do the right thing. But if in other cultures it might be like, oh, well, here's this guy coming in, he probably his own fault for injuring his leg, maybe he's being a bit of an idiot or whatever it is, and people don't behave in that way, then that sort of trust among strangers. Sort of broader point, I think, about Danish society, which is like it is a society in that there is a common good that people are willing to invest in, as opposed to I'm here in my own little tribe or whatever, or like my own subset of people, and I'm only going to do things that are to the benefit of that thing. So you might say, I think an example we talk about is, imagine you get a letter in the post that says you've not paid enough, you paid too much taxes, or like by mistake you get a tax refund. And they sort of do this study in like different countries in the world, like what do you do? Like you receive a letter saying you've been given a tax refund, and that's incorrect.
Right. You shouldn't get this back.
You shouldn't get this back.
What do you do with it?
What do you do with it? And I think it's sort of, where does your alliances lie? So in certain countries, it might be like, well, that's clearly a mistake. I'll pay the money back because I believe that this is an honest system, and I know that if this money goes back, it goes to good things. In other cultures, if you benefit in this way, it's the right thing to do is to support your family or to give it to your friends, etc. Because and to give it back to the system, to give it back to the government, would be the wrong thing to do. It would be like, you'd be like, what you're prioritizing the government over your own family. Like, we're struggling, we have these bills to pay. Suddenly, this thing comes in, and like you give it back. Like, it's the wrong thing to do. And so I think Denmark is, for a number of reasons, in this place where people are willing to sort of invest in this common thing, and their sort of tribe is the country, and that way the whole country sort of benefits.
But that can set up some interesting culture shocks, I think, for foreigners. When we come to a very high trust society, maybe different than the one that we grew up in, there are some of those potential for...
It is, and I think generally, it's normally positive culture shock.
Sure.
Like being in situations where suddenly someone trusts you, and you're like, wow, this doesn't quite feel right, but this feels great. Like sort of spoke about it a bit in the episode. There is like, on a physiological level, some hormones that are released when you exhibit trust, and there is like a legit glow that sort of comes from it.
Wow. And speaking of the episode, we'll have the full link in the description so that people can find it and give it a listen, because it's obviously much more in depth than we'll get into here, but so fascinating. And one thing I remember distinctly is you talk about kind of the history in Denmark.
Fast forward sort of a couple of hundred years, there are many other opportunities or things that happen in Danish society whereby groups of people come together in a sort of democratic level environment, and they sort of make decisions themselves and come to a way where they cooperate to have a good outcome. So in the UK, for example, historically very hierarchical, and so the way that people organised was like you had the lord who said peasants do this thing, or even then you had the aristocracy who said sort of very much a top-down thing. Whereas because there's not necessarily that steep class hierarchy, if things needed to be done, it was typically on the same level, and so people had to come up with these rules of engaging with each other, and that just means that sort of from a very early age and for a long time, people in Denmark have just organised themselves in a way where they've had to trust people, and when they've trusted each other and it comes back, then you feel like you want to trust people some more, and it kind of builds this level. That's my best understanding of it.
Really. And you see it, but you see it today even still in the taxes, where overall most people feel like they get something for the taxes that they pay, even though they're higher, and they're okay with that system because they get something in return. They trust the government to
exactly
provide.
There is a sense that the system is
the
fair.
system works and it's fair, yeah.
And I know that in other places of the world, the system is run by crooked people.
And there can be some other culture clashes, I think, as well for foreigners like us, because even time is something that's viewed as trust. I think being punctual is not as much of a focus in American culture, I would say. I know I still struggle with being late to things, but I know it's more important here in Scandinavia. But I think that's also a bit of trust as well.
It is, and I think it sort of goes back to this this idea of predictability. Like if you're
sure.
in this society where if people say come to my house at 6 p.m. and that if someone says come to your house at 6 p.m. you come at 6 p.m. Well, obvious. But if in the UK, for example, you say 6 p.m. and really people mean come any time until 6:30, and therefore when they say I'll pick you up later, you're like, well, you kind of lied about the arriving at 6 p.m, so I'm not quite sure. And that's what can make it seem a bit difficult for Danes to really feel aligned with people who are not behaving in the way that they would predict.
Sure. I think one of the most famous culture clashes in that regard actually happened in New York City, but it was a Danish woman, I believe an actress, that left her baby, like a lot of Danes do, and I think in Scandinavia elsewhere, left their baby outside.
It's quite a shock to sort of see to walk past a cafe and be like, people's babies are there, like, don't they love them? But yeah, this lady was in New York, I think it was New York, and left her baby in the pram outside, and then like people called the cops. They were like, this is child negligence,
right,
or whatever.
And she had to go to court, and she may even gotten arrested. Yeah.
And it's like people just could not get their head.
I think
around
the embassies were involved. I mean, it was.
And this woman was like, no, I'm from Denmark. This is like normal. And they were like, sure. They're like, no, like, no way.
No way.
Yeah, don't try and pull that card on us. But she was like, no, really. And I'm pretty sure it went to court, and she had to fight to be like.
I think she had to agree to leave the country. I think something.
Really?
I think so.
Yeah, and it's just like I'm not a bad mother. I'm just letting my baby sleep, but it just wasn't compatible with it.
Yeah. So but besides that culture clash, are there any other maybe downsides to?
Yeah, I think that the
high level of trust.
Yeah, I think that the downside is that you can often be taken advantage of.
Sure.
So if you go back to this like cooperative system or cheating system. If you're in a place where everyone cooperates, then it's like win-win-win. This idea of if you believe that others will cooperate, and then they have the opportunity to cheat you, and then they cheat you, then that's a bad outcome for you. And so that's often, I think, from speaking to researching the episode and speaking. I can't speak as a Dane. But Danes often talk about going abroad and being cheated, like being a bit like, if someone says they're going to, not steal my wallet, or no, that's a rubbish example. If someone says they'll do something, then they will. And then suddenly they're like, oh my God, they actually cheated me.
There are some places where they don't put the price on the menu, for example, and you know that the locals probably get a different price, but it can make you a bit uncomfortable. At least I noticed that.
Yeah, and like sort of another example is, so I used to live in Kenya before Denmark, and it's quite common in Kenya to get house help, to have a cleaner, and didn't happen with me, but I know people where they have trusted a cleaner or a gardener to sort of look after the house when they go on holiday or they're away, and then they come back and they've been stopped, and jewellery has gone missing, for example. At least sort of in the UK, nurses going and doing home visits used to be that you'd basically say, like, as a nurse, you're trusted to kind of to do your job. Whereas now there has to be a lot more sort of paperwork filled out, as in like, where were you at this time, who's this. And like, obviously there are some good things in that, because like, you're dealing with vulnerable people, it's good to have these checks in place, but it does erode out that freedom that comes from having a more trusting society, and sort of the dividend that comes from being in a place where there is this underlying layer of trust. And I think for me that's one of the nicest things about being in Denmark, is you just realise how much simpler things are. So, an example, I bought something off Instagram the other day, and I was just talking with the seller, and said, cool, so it cost this much, okay, here's my address, and she was like, yep, sent it now, can you send me the money? It's like, yep, here's the money. So easy. There was no escrow payment, there was no send me half, once it's come we'll send the other half. There was no like, okay, we're gonna like meet in public and like take time out of our day to like check the thing and put it back. She was like, if I send this thing to this complete stranger, I trust that he will pay me the money.
So there are dividends to having that level of trust.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time. And if you guys want to hear more about things that are quite normal in Denmark but would horrify Danes about life in the US, like being late, not being able to leave your child outside, and all of those things, you can watch this video right here. You can watch the entire episode of What the Denmark with Sam and learn more about trust in Denmark. Thanks for watching, everybody.